She was the face of the swinging 60s, a wide-eyed model who became a queen of the rock and roll elite. Her image graced the cover of Vogue, and her life became the inspiration for not one, but three of the most iconic love songs ever written. For decades, the story of Pattie Boyd, George Harrison, and Eric Clapton has been sold as rock's ultimate love triangle, a story of passion, poetry, and mythic romance. But at 81 years old, Pattie Boyd is clarifying the narrative. And it's not a fairy tale, it's a cautionary tale. Since publishing her tell-all memoir in 2007, she has peeled back the layers on her marriage to music icon Eric Clapton. A relationship defined not by the gentle romance of Wonderful Tonight, but by a terrifying spiral of addiction, endless betrayal, and a deep psychological cruelty that was hidden from the world for years. In her own words, Pattie described the moment she discovered her husband had secretly fathered 2 children with other women, all while she was enduring the physical and emotional agony of infertility treatments. She called the discovery a stab in the heart. It was a pain so profound she felt her heart might actually disintegrate. This wasn't just a rocky patch in a famous marriage. This was a private hell unfolding behind the curtain of fame. So how did one of music's most legendary love affairs, a story that began with poetic letters and a song that brought the world to its knees, become a story of such profound deception and torment? To understand the dark reality hidden beneath the glamour, we have to go back to the beginning, to a time before the heartbreak, when a young model stepped onto a movie set and into history. Long before she was Mrs. Harrison or Mrs. Clapton, Patricia Ann Boyd was one of the signature faces of 1960s London. Born in Somerset, England, she navigated a complicated childhood before finding her footing in the explosive world of fashion modeling in 1962. Alongside figures like Jean Shrimpton, Pattie epitomized the British look of the era, blend of innocence and burgeoning sophistication that perfectly captured the cultural moment. Her career was taking off. She was independent, working in international cities and gracing the pages of the world's most prestigious fashion magazines. In 1964, that career led her to a small role in a film that would change her life and the landscape of popular culture forever. The film was A Hard Day's Night. On her very first day on set, she met the Beatles. As a 20-year-old cast as a schoolgirl, she was instantly captivated by their charm. And one Beatle, in particular, was captivated by her. George Harrison, the so-called quiet Beatle, was smitten. Within moments of meeting her, he asked her to marry him. When a stunned Pattie didn't answer, he quickly followed up with, "Well, if you won't marry me, will you at least have dinner with me?" At the time, Pattie had a boyfriend and politely declined a decision. She immediately regretted after her friends reacted with total disbelief that she'd turned down a Beatle. She ended her existing relationship, and when she saw George again, he was ready. Their first date was chaperoned by the band's manager, Brian Epstein, a surreal beginning to a romance that would soon consume the public's imagination. They married on January 21, 1966. From the outside, it was a perfect rock and roll fairy tale. Pattie was now part of the most exclusive inner circle in music, a world of unimaginable wealth, fame, and creativity. She was George's muse, the direct inspiration for some of his most beautiful songs, including the timeless masterpiece, Something. Their home, Friar Park, was a fantastical estate, a playground for the rock elite where friends like Mick Jagger and Jeff Beck were regular visitors. But as Pattie would later reveal, this fairy tale was, at times, more like a nightmare. The gilded cage she lived in began to feel more and more like a prison of isolation. The pressures of Beatlemania were immense. Pattie was shy by nature, and being the wife of a Beatle meant being a public target. She was attacked by jealous fans, constantly scrutinized by the press, and struggled with the loss of her anonymity. But the cracks in their marriage ran deeper than just the pressures of fame. As the 1960s drew to a close, George became increasingly consumed by his spiritual quest. His devotion to Indian mysticism and meditation, while creatively fulfilling for him, created a profound emotional distance between them. Pattie recalled him becoming withdrawn, spending most of his time chanting, and growing angry if she interrupted him. She began to feel left behind, an outsider in her own home. This emotional neglect was soon compounded by betrayal. The ethos of the era permeated their lives, and George began having affairs. Groupies were a regular part of his life on tour, but his infidelities eventually hit closer to home. In what became an infamous episode within their circle, George began a blatant affair with Maureen Starkey, the wife of his bandmate and dear friend, Ringo Starr. For Pattie, this was a devastating blow. When she later found George and Maureen in a bedroom together at their home, his only response was to laugh. The betrayal from her husband and a close friend pushed Pattie further into a state of despair. She has said that things were getting really out of hand, and that George was becoming a different person. The fairy tale had dissolved, leaving behind a lonely wife in a sprawling mansion, emotionally starved and vulnerable. It was in this state of profound unhappiness that she found a letter, a passionate, poetic plea from a man who saw her not just as George Harrison's wife, but as an object of divine obsession. That man was George's best friend, Eric Clapton. Clapton was a regular fixture at Friar Park, a close friend who would often visit to write and play music with George. But his visits had a dual purpose. From the moment he saw Pattie, he was utterly infatuated. What began as a secret crush soon morphed into a dangerous, all-consuming obsession. Pattie recalled in her book, Wonderful Tonight, that while her own marriage was crumbling, Eric's presence became a constant, intense undercurrent. He began to pursue her relentlessly, not with casual advances, but with the full force of his artistic and emotional being. The pursuit started with a series of desperate, beautifully written love letters. One of the first arrived anonymously. She recalled that she initially dismissed it as a note from a strange fan and even showed it to George, who brushed it off. Later that night, the phone rang. It was Eric. "Did you get my letter?" he asked. The realization hit her. The beautifully penned, agonizingly passionate words were from him. He was asking her if she still loved her husband and pleading with her not to leave him a disappointed and restless man. For a woman feeling neglected and alone, the attention was intoxicatingly flattering, but also deeply troubling. She was married to his best friend. Clapton's obsession, however, wasn't easily deterred. When Pattie initially resisted his advances, choosing to remain in her troubled marriage, his pursuit took on a darker, more manipulative tone. He began dating her younger sister, Paula, a move Pattie later saw as a desperate attempt to have the next best thing to her. But his heart remained fixed on Pattie. His longing found its ultimate expression in what would become his magnum opus, a song that stands as one of the most tormented declarations of love in rock history, Layla. The song was inspired by the story of Layla and Majnun, an ancient Persian poem about a man driven to madness by his unrequited love for a woman he cannot have. Eric saw himself as Majnun and Pattie as his Layla. He played the sprawling, 7-minute rock symphony for her one day, a raw explosion of guitar riffs and desperate vocals. She recalled feeling both mesmerized by its beauty and terrified that George would instantly know it was about her. The song was Eric's heart, laid bare for her and the world to hear. According to Pattie's account, the situation finally came to a dramatic head at a party. George, growing suspicious, found Pattie and Eric talking alone in the garden. He confronted them, demanding to know what was going on. It was then that Clapton, man to man, reportedly confessed to his best friend, "I have to tell you, man, that I'm in love with your wife." A furious George issued an ultimatum to a horrified Pattie. "Are you going with him or coming with me?" Overwhelmed, she chose to go home with her husband. But Clapton's obsession was now tied to his own self-destruction. He descended deeper into a heroin addiction, telling Pattie that if she didn't leave George for him, he would spiral completely, and it would be her fault. For 3 years, he largely disappeared into a drug-fueled haze. Meanwhile, Pattie's marriage to George continued to disintegrate, with his affair with Maureen Starkey being the final straw. She finally left him in 1974. Their divorce was finalized in 1977. It wasn't long after her separation that she reconnected with Eric Clapton, who had emerged from his exile. In 1979, they were married. The public saw it as the ultimate romantic victory. The poet had finally won his muse. The story of Layla had its happy ending, but behind the scenes, a far more disgusting truth was about to begin. If you are finding this story as compelling as we are, take a moment to hit the subscribe button and join our community. We explore the hidden stories of music history every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. The marriage of Eric Clapton and Pattie Boyd began with a promise. Clapton had pledged to conquer his heroin addiction for her, and for a fleeting moment, it seemed like their love could overcome anything. But the reality that unfolded was a brutal descent into a new kind of hell. One few him this astounding display of narcissistic cruelty exposed the true, dark nature of their relationship. The man who had once placed her on a pedestal now treated her with a complete lack of empathy. This grotesque reality makes the love songs he wrote for her feel like a twisted joke. The story behind Wonderful Tonight is perhaps the most poignant example. The song paints a picture of a man filled with awe as he watches his partner get ready for a party. And while he did write it for her during one such evening, Pattie has revealed the ugly truth of what often happened next. She said that later on nights just like that one, Eric would get so blackout drunk that he became enraged and abusive, completely shattering the tender moment the song immortalized. It was a perfect metaphor for their marriage, a beautiful romantic facade hiding a rotten, painful core. Trapped in this cycle of abuse and betrayal, Pattie began to break down, developing her own struggles with alcohol to cope. She felt like she had lost her own identity, famously questioning, "I was no longer Mrs. Famous George Dort, Mrs. Famous Eric. So who am I? I am no one." The marriage officially ended in 1989, with the divorce filing citing Clapton's infidelity and unreasonable behavior. Leaving him wasn't just the end of a relationship. For Pattie Boyd, it was an act of survival. The divorce from Eric Clapton in 1989 was more than a legal proceeding. It was an escape. For over a decade, Pattie Boyd had lived in the shadow of addiction, infidelity, and profound emotional neglect. The end of the marriage left her feeling adrift, stripped of the identity that had defined her adult life. She was no longer the wife of a Beatle, nor the wife of a guitar god. The question that haunted her was, who am I? The journey to answer that question would be long, but it would ultimately lead her to a place of peace, transforming her from a famous muse into the author of her own life story. In the immediate aftermath of the split, Pattie faced a severe emotional crisis. She has spoken openly about the breakdown she suffered as a consequence of the years of trauma she had endured. The constant betrayals and the psychological toll of living with an active alcoholic had left deep scars. She sought professional help, entering into years of psychotherapy to process the pain and reclaim her sense of self. Her therapist helped guide her out of what she described as a mire of despond, and gradually, she learned to believe in herself. Again, a crucial part of her healing was rediscovering her own creativity. She turned to photography, a passion she'd had for years. Throughout her time with the Beatles and Clapton, she had always had a camera with her, capturing intimate, behind-the-scenes moments of some of the most legendary figures in music history. Her photography was more than a hobby. It was her perspective, her eye, her story. She began holding exhibitions of her photographs around the world, giving her a professional identity that was entirely her own. In 2007, she took the most significant step in reclaiming her story by publishing her autobiography, Wonderful Tonight, George Harrison, Eric Clapton, and Me. The book, which debuted at the top of the New York Times bestseller list, was her opportunity to tell the truth. As she saw it, it was here that she laid bare the painful realities of her marriages, detailing the highs and the devastating lows with unflinching honesty. She wasn't just sharing gossip, she was documenting the emotional cost of being a muse. The book was a sensation because it was a story of survival, a testament to her resilience. Her relationships with her famous ex-husbands also evolved. Despite the pain of their divorce, her connection with George Harrison endured as a deep friendship. She has said that, even after they split, a part of them always loved each other. He even visited her shortly before his death in 2001, a final tender moment between two people who had shared a profound life-changing chapter together. Her relationship with Eric Clapton is more complex but is now described as amicable. In 2015, Pattie Boyd found a different kind of love, marrying property developer Rod Weston, a man she had been with for many years. This relationship represents a quiet, stable happiness, far removed from the turbulent passion of her past. Now in her 80s, she continues to be active with her photography and shares her story with a sense of perspective and peace. Her journey has been one of immense struggle, but it is ultimately a story of resilience. She survived the wreckage of her rock and roll fairy tale and emerged not as a victim, but as a survivor who finally found her own voice and her own worth. The story of Pattie Boyd is woven into the very fabric of rock and roll mythology. She is the face that launched 1,000 riffs, the muse behind Something, Layla, and Wonderful Tonight. For decades, that was her identity and inspiration, an object of desire, a beautiful accessory to male genius. But the story she tells, today, at 81 years old, is a powerful and unsettling corrective to that myth. It's a raw and honest account of what it truly costs to love men who are worshipped as gods. Her marriage to Eric Clapton wasn't the romantic epic the world believed it to be. It was a harrowing journey through the darkest valleys of addiction and betrayal. It was the story of a woman trying to build a family while her husband secretly created others. It was the story of enduring abuse from the same man who wrote lyrics that made him sound like the most sensitive soul on earth. The disgusting truth is that the transcendent beauty of the music often concealed a dark, ugly, and deeply painful reality. The love wasn't always as pure as the songs suggested, and the muse was a real woman, with a real heart that was broken again and again. But to frame Pattie Boyd's story only by her pain is to miss the most important part of her legacy. Her life is a profound testament to resilience. She endured the unimaginable pressures of global fame, the heartbreak of 2 divorces from 2 of the most famous men on the planet, and the deep, personal grief of infertility and betrayal. And yet, she didn't just disappear. She reclaimed her narrative, first through her photography and then through her own words. She forced the world to see her not just as Layla, but as Pattie, a survivor, an artist, and a woman of incredible strength. Her story forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about the relationship between art and suffering. Can we still hear Layla or Wonderful Tonight in the same way, knowing the pain and cruelty that were intertwined with their creation? It challenges the romantic notion of the troubled male genius, reminding us that there are often real people who bear the brunt of their destructive behavior. Pattie Boyd's life is a cautionary tale about losing yourself in someone else's shadow. But more than that, it's an inspiring story about the courage it takes to step out of that shadow and into the light, finally finding a voice, an identity, and a peace that is truly your own. What do you think is the true price of being a muse? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for joining us for this look into the hidden truths of rock and roll history. If you found this story compelling, please hit the like button, share it with a friend, and make sure you're subscribed for more untold stories behind the legends. Click on the screen now to see another video from our channel. We'll see you next time.